Hey, Staffing Monthly. I am excited for this July technology issue, and I went out and found the guru when it comes, literally the GOAT. If you look at her LinkedIn profile, she has the GOAT on there, and deservedly so. This is somebody that I've gotten to know and am duly impressed with her track record in staffing. Have been in this industry for over 2 decades. And within that time, she's carved out this amazing niche as being the go-to guru when it comes to tech stack or technology in the staffing industry, as well as pairing that or mapping it nicely with business operations. And because of that expertise and how much value that she has to give to people in our industry, she actually founded Leap Consulting in 2020, coming up on 2.5 years ago, and has just taken the world by storm, even last year being listed as one of the top 15 people to watch in the industry, and even one of the top 200 power thought influencers to pay attention to. And I think she's earned every bit of that billing. And I am really, really excited to have Lauren B. Jones from Leap Consulting on with us. Lauren, how are you today? Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dan. I'm super excited to be here. The fangirling, as we call it over here, it goes both ways. I'm super impressed with your resume as well. So I'm just honored to be here.
I really appreciate that. I really do. That means a lot. And I'm excited about the collaborations that we're going to have, going forward. I
Me too.
love the projects you're working on, and I know that you can add value to the people I work with. So, hey, just for the benefit of our viewers that might not be aware of who you are, which I think that might only be one person, maybe. Let them know, like, what are you doing in staffing right now? How are you connected to staffing with Leap Consulting?
Yeah, it's a great question. As you stated, I've been in the industry for over 2 decades, which we're just gonna go with the idea that I started in kindergarten, and so you don't know how old I am, and I saw three areas of opportunity, both in small business procurement of tech, and then in enterprise, all sizes of business, where I saw them making the same mistakes. And so as I was an early casualty of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and opened my firm on March 2nd of 2020, which is normally my opening punchline, everybody gets a giggle out of that. But we found ourselves in a really good spot, fitting into a gap that became this chasm, and the three areas where I saw opportunity was one, helping businesses make expeditious decisions when it comes to technology. I was seeing businesses with these year-long RFP processes and 27 steering committees and these, just lengthy processes. And by the time we get done, the technology has surpassed whatever evaluation, it just becomes irrelevant so quickly. And, but when you're talking about $14 billion worth of VC funding being thrown at HR tech or work tech or all the new nomenclature that's around all the technology that supports our industry, I thought I have an opportunity to help simplify this and help businesses understand and give them a meaningful way to make good decisions in a short period of time so that they can stay relevant and stay innovating and minimize this disruption that happens. And then secondly, the business process change management. I saw a lot of businesses like migrating from one technology to the other, and then trying to make the new technology the old technology because that's what they were familiar with, as opposed to taking it as an opportunity to see what the technology that they're purchasing has out of the box, reevaluating their business processes to align with that so that you have the ultimate scalability as you continue to mature with the tech. And so business process management is probably where we spend the most of our time with businesses. And comparatively, the final pillar of offerings is adoption. And that's kind of where I've put all my eggs, in the basket. I think if we can nail how people are learning today, and you'll see, the traditional LMS is sort of going the way of the dinosaur, and it's more the LXP. We're talking about learning experiences, micro modules of learning, because that's the way people learn today. And so we're doing bespoke training and adoption, a lot of intranet building to create community internally, and give people a place to go like YouTube, because we learn in those little micro sessions today. When you're on YouTube and you want to learn something, goat weathering, which is, I'm a farmer, right? I learned to farm on YouTube, and you put in your very specific, trimming a chicken's feathers, right? And you get there, a 3-minute video on how to do something, and people, that resonates with people, and that's how people are learning today. And we're trying to honor the way people are learning today and creating those for businesses.
I love that. I love that. And I'll tell you, the main reason that I love that is because it is so relevant. Like, who does not go to YouTube University these days to learn stuff?
Right.
And the fact that you're using that relative touch point to really this generation, I guess the most relevant 2 generations in the workforce right now are there, but you're pairing that with the adoption phase, because I feel like, from my experience, that's the most overlooked part of technology implementation. I feel like the old way of doing it, or the most common way of doing it, is we got this new shiny object, go get them, champ, right? Is that what you're seeing?
Well, yeah, and think about it this way. I mean, Bullhorn, TempWorks. I mean, TempWorks has this knowledge bank that is vast, and as does Bullhorn. But if you configure your instance of those technologies in any meaningful way, and you go to those generic videos as a new end user, you could find yourself lost and thinking, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me. None of my nomenclature is in there. Is this video for my instance of, and you find yourself looking around and not really learning. So this idea of bespoke, meaning it's my instance of Bullhorn and or TempWorks or what have you, and it's my workflows and my process that we're creating these little micro learnings around, so that our mission with learning is, in 5 hours, you're functional. In 5 days, you can be independent. And in 5 months, you can teach someone else. And so everything that we build is around that type of learning, that you can have these short sprints of learning to help increase adoption.
So smart, because I would challenge anybody to find me a recruiter that has the time to watch a 1-hour webinar about how to optimize applicant sourcing and mass FMS, right? Like, and if they don't, I mean, they don't need one more thing to do, right? So no, I think that's smart. And giving it, I mean, if you really, that's the biggest thing. If you want to capture somebody in the moment and they're like, oh, how do I do this? Like, they just want a really quick clip that says, how do I do this one thing that I'm struggling with right now? Like, they don't want to have it packaged amongst the bigger modules. So I think that's brilliant. I think it's a great approach. Kudos to you.
Well, thank you. None of our videos are over 6 minutes. And it's for that purpose right there, Dan, that you mentioned, is recruiters in action. And they're like, oh, I forgot how to do advanced search. How to advanced search. Yeah. 3-minute video, how to advanced search, period, done, go forth and conquer.
Exactly, because like, there is nothing that will kill the ROI of, the owners or managers or executives' investment into very expensive technology than lack of user adoption. So it's smart. I think it's a great approach.
Well, thank you.
So here is the first question I want to ask, because this is the July Staffing Monthly technology issue, where we're going to be featuring different components of the tech stack. Yet that is a terminology that was not born in the staffing industry. That actually comes out of the tech industry, but you're an expert. So why don't you break down for us, what exactly is a staffing tech stack? What is that?
Well, a technology stack, also known as a solution stack or technology infrastructure or ecosystem, is essentially just the list of technology services that are used to build and run one experience. And so if you can look at it as, all of your beautiful software as a service stacked on top of each other to create this one meaningful experience for all of your end users. And we have our front office, our mid office, and our back office. And we want all all of those things working in harmony to create one unified experience, both internally and externally. And I don't love, all the buzzwords, omnichannel, tech stack, pass, all, because I think that it just creates more confusion
It does.
around a world that is already very muddy. And so I love that you asked to define that. And in its simplest form, it's all of the tools that we need to create an experience internally and externally.
Okay, so I want to go more granular because I like specificity. So give me an example of a very common tech stack that you might see when working with your customers.
Sure.
And name the softwares. Like I want to know like what the software is, what do they do, just so people can really kind of wrap their head around what we're talking about when they think about tech stack.
Sure. A very common stack is going to be your Bullhorn, Bullhorn and its marketplace and all of those other partners. And you're seeing Bullhorn as your primary ATS and CRM. And then you have this marketplace that will allow you to stack other technologies around it for function. So you'll see your job distribution in tools like EDBoo and Broadbean. You'll see your onboarding in tools like Able 365. And some of those products belong to Bullhorn, some of them belong to the marketplace. And what's great about Bullhorn, Aviante, Salesforce, I think Salesforce hasn't done a service to our industry specifically. There's 6,700 apps in the App Exchange, 427 of them, I think. That probably changes every day, are natively integrated, but none of them are organized for staffing and recruiting, which can make that ecosystem really overwhelming to go dive into. But a very common stack is going to be Maurice does a really good job of putting that infinity sign, where we have this life cycle. And so we're literally plucking technologies to honor each part of that cycle. So job distribution, EDBoo, Broadbean, if you want to go programmatic, PandaLogic, you've got your core ATS and CRM in tools like Bullhorn. You have onboarding with Able, eStaff 365. You have your Prism HR for back office, or ePay. Those are very common. And then you have your GL with QuickBooks and Sage and other tools like that. Those are very, very common stacks. And then some ancillary add-ons, like if you need more robust parsing than Bullhorn can offer out of the box, they leverage Sovereign as their out-of-the-box parser. So if you want something that has a little more meat on the bones, which in healthcare, for example, you'd need something with a little more meat on the bones, so you'd pick up a Dijkstra or a source breaker or a text kernel. So those are all of that right there could be a pretty sassy little stack there if you configured it the right way.
Yeah, and I think that's important to know. And the one thing that I want to make sure is not lost on people, because I know that we're in the people industry, our businesses are run by people. And I know we share a similar philosophy, and the value of technology should be to truly optimize the human processes of the business. So any thoughts around how to balance that to make sure that technology is truly improving or optimizing the human processes of the business and not getting lost to kind of over technologicalization? I don't know if that's a word.
We used a good one the other day. I'll think of it in just a second. But yes, to keep the process human, if you can look at technology as an enablement tool and not a replacement, then we will then fuel and power our end users, recruiters, candidates, customers in a more meaningful way. If we think, how can I enable my recruiter to give a more meaningful experience? We won't remove them from the process or the workflow. We will engage them and enable them to do it more quickly. Maybe that's with automation. Maybe it's with an integrated product, like a referencing. Referoo is a really cool one out of Australia that I've seen, super quick implementation, really fast ROI. And so being able to plug in those tools really quickly, it can enable your recruiter in a really meaningful way, because it can add leads and opportunities into the system from those references. It can allow visibility to that information so you could more meaningfully submit that candidate. So it's being able to articulate the why we're making this purchase or this investment, how it enables each particular end user. Because if we get references back in a more efficient way, we can assign the person in a more in a faster way, reducing time to fill. So each one of these tools that we're looking at, if you can think, how can I better enable my end user? How can I better enable my business? You'll move away from replacing functionality. And nomenclature is, the way that we talk about technology is really important. It shouldn't be a replacement. Your recruiter should be on relationships. Your technology should be on repetitive tasks. So those are kind of my rules. Repetitive tasks is tech, relationships are people.
I think that makes a ton of sense, because I really believe that as our industry moves into what is likely to be very turbulent times over the next 18 months of uncertainty, which is not what anybody wants to hear coming off of the last, 2.5 years of uncertainty, but it's the likelihood. And I think that the agencies that position themselves with technology and they focus on user experience on both the candidate side and the client side, I think they're the ones that are going to win. And do you see that differently?
No, I see that just the same. And I had the pleasure of listening to Jared Levine, who's one of the principals at Stone Point, which is the investment firm to Bullhorn, Eliason Group, Beeline, right? And listen to him talk about this impending recession, this impending doom that the media, my God, are they just going to will a recession
Yes.
into existence,
Yes.
right?
Yes, they are.
With a doom and gloom. But he said something really interesting. He said, recessions are like snowflakes. There's no one that's the same.
That's true.
And the way that we have to go into this recession is knowing that in our industry specifically, there is still significant demand. And particularly when there is uneasiness in the marketplace is when we thrive. So I think it's more of a conversation, and what he said that businesses needed to do, as opposed to batten down the hatches and lay everybody off and balancing out sheets. He was saying, be thoughtful. That was the word he used multiple times. Thoughtful, deliberate, and disciplined in your spend. And if you are not looking at the way you spend money, where you spend money, how frequently you spend money, he talked about liquidity being a really, really big deal as we go into this. And I thought it was brilliant, but B, I thought it was right on point with how we need to look at our, this sort of scary time that we may be going into, is that if we are deliberate and disciplined, we will make it through this very scary time that I think you're right. I think it's going to get a little bit bumpy. And I think we just have to be deliberate and disciplined.
I agree with that. And I think he's 100% spot on when he talks about being thoughtful with your spend, and to tie that to a point you made earlier about how you evaluate a tech stack and how it's going to actually benefit the end user, which is our internal employees of an agency. If you think about being thoughtful and where you spend your money and how it's going to impact the end user of our staffing services, and are you driving value? Do you have, can you actually provide tangible ROI value to your customers, or can you save them money? Can they show like a traditional like absolute savings, or can you de-risk a volatile time? If you can tangibly do one of those three things heading into a time of uncertainty, you're going to be well positioned to serve your customers. And that's really the way to navigate it. And one of the things that I coach on is that any time of recession, there's always the companies that benefit and the ones that don't, right? And if you're in staffing, you just have to hitch your wagon to the ones that are benefiting from it, despite all the, you don't want to ever benefit from the unfortunate situation of somebody else, but it's just the nature of the market. So you find those companies and they will need your people, and so I agree with it, that we will be in high demand. And It's the companies that are nimble enough and thoughtful about the way they're approaching technology and the human element that are they're gonna come out on top.
Yeah. 100%. I'll say one last thing about the recession. And I thought it was very interesting coming from a PE firm, because normally it is, cut people, cut heads, to cut costs, to balance, to get a balance. And it was the exact opposite. Cut your real estate, cut anything but your most important asset, which for me was one of the most refreshing things I'd ever heard from a private equity representative, because that is just not what we hear normally.
It's so true. And that really isn't. And you, especially in times of uncertainty like this, you need to focus on your internal talent, because that's all value of staffing agencies are created at the desk, right? That's just the truth of it. So if you've got strong people working desks, they're going to create the value. Everything else you have, real estate, everything that's in the SG&A, that's really going to be just optimizing the value that you have. And I don't care how lean of an operation is, there's always a little bit of waste that can be optimized to better, lean you out to navigate a recession. So I think he's spot on. So yeah. I've got a very pointed question that I would like you to tackle as it comes to a tech stack, because I think there's a lot of people that came through the pandemic and they're like, our technology is insufficient, or it's disjointed, or it's not getting me an ROI, or I don't know how to use it, right? I think there's a lot of people in that camp, and they're probably thinking, how do I even get my head around it? So if there's a listener or a viewer out there right now, Lauren, that is kind of trying to wrap their head around technology and the steps that they should take to strengthen their tech stack, what would you say to that person to sort of walk them through the overview of the steps they should take to get to a better place?
I have I have a guideline, I have a little guide. It's called 5 Considerations of Digital Transformation. Like, what are the considerations? What are the things that what's the list of things I should be, because I love myself a good list. What are the list of things I should be considering when I'm thinking about doing this? And so for me, it's timing and tolerance, right? There is something to be said for doing things at the right time. If it is your peak season and you are hair on fire, that is not the time to implement a new technology. If we want to see money get wasted and lack of adoption run rampant, then do it at your peak season. But alas, I see this happen all the time. So timing and tolerance. And what I mean by tolerance is, have you created a culture of change? Because if there's no tolerance for ongoing change, which is what is going to become the norm in our world with as quickly as technology is moving, and with as quickly as behavior changes in our job seekers, if you haven't put the work in to create a culture of change, you will immediately come up against resistance. Now, that can be overcome with a little bit of time and effort, but it's not something that you can just put on the light and say, okay, now we're a culture of change. It takes a little bit more work than that. So timing and tolerance is the very first consideration that I talk about with my customers. Have we already done so much change that we're in change fatigue? Do we not have good lead time and scope? Do we not have good communication and internal marketing? And Matt Fisher, and I give him credit for this all the time, said one of the best quotes of 2021 at Gigi last year. And he said, digital marketing as a core competency will be the difference maker for businesses moving forward. And
100%.
I 100% agree with him. And I'll take it one step further and say digital marketing as a core competency internally and externally will be the difference maker for businesses moving forward. So timing and tolerance should be your first consideration, and the work that you need to put into creating a culture of change, and ensuring that we're smart about the timing of when we do these things. The second is resources. Do you have the resources to support this type of change? And I always say that digital transformation needs to be accompanied with structural transformation, period, end. You cannot buy all of this stuff and not have a watcher. To your point earlier, there's so much that happens within the technology. And if we're not prepared to scale with it, I found myself in an organization at one point where we were 10 versions behind, a technology where the technology was
Ouch.
existing. And so you need, if you're going to make the investment, you have to have the resources internally to ensure that you continue to scale with the technology. And if you're going to go in Salesforce, you need to have a Salesforce admin. If you're going to do Bullhorn, you need to have a Bullhorn admin. These are kind of the table stakes now for having these tech stacks. There are multiple technologies. And I'm sorry, Mr. CEO of small company and Mrs. CEO of small company, you are not the person that's going to do this. You need somebody that's going to do that. And whether you outsource it, and I think that this is a meaningful part for you and I as consultants to the industry, is there are certain tasks that you can outsource within your organization for a duration of time that are
Yeah.
really smart moves. And we do administration. I have a partner that does software administration, doing all of your onboarding of your internal new hires and ensuring all of the profiles and user entitlements are set up appropriately. Those are things that you can outsource, but you must have resources when you are considering digital transformation. And then the third is process, right? I talked about that earlier. We have to understand what processes are currently working, what's currently broken, who does the process work for? Because if it's just one person, yeah, that's not a great process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not what's in it for me and what's in it for you, it's what's in it for all when we're looking at process. And so really trying to plan workflows to the majority, and then saving exceptions for some of those operational changes, business process changes that we'll look at. Because I'll tell you one thing, technology is not always the answer. Sometimes it's a good old process change.
That's true. That's true. And that really should be the beginning of step 3 here, is to really evaluate and document your SOPs and understand like who does the work, who's the beneficiary, and what is the desired outcome and what's the actual outcome. Because that's an opportunity for improvement without even moving to technology potentially. So I like that.
That gap analysis is so important. Where are you? Where do you want to be? How much time do you have to get there? What resources do you have to get there? Right? Establishing all of that is really important in looking holistically and objectively at your process. And if you hear a little barking, it get out here on the farm, it can get really exciting when the UPS man comes.
Oh, exciting times.
Okay, so the fourth consideration that we're looking at is metrics and rewards. And so if you are looking at partnering with a technology and they cannot tell you what their ROI is, and they can't demonstrate ROI, or they can't tell you how they're going to measure it for you, this is not something that you need to be doing. The technology that you are purchasing should be able to deliver back to you in a consistent way, in a consistent reporting mechanism back to you, the ROI that they bring to the organization. There is some measurable component within your organization that can be measured by your technology investment. And then metrics and rewards for your internal staff. If you want adoption, how are you incentivizing that? What are the things that we're doing within the organization to incentivize the desired behavior? So metrics and rewards aren't just exclusive to the technology that we're looking to monitor and ensure that we're getting that return on an investment. I used to have a report card for every single report card. I like A, B, C, D.
Of course you did. Of course
for
you did.
every vendor to determine, what grade am I? And then when we're sitting down, and this is the other missing link on metrics and rewards, is I sat down quarterly with my vendor partners to understand what's on your roadmap, because roadmap misalignment can be a very long-term problem. If your roadmap is not aligned with where they're going, and so these are questions you want to ask technologies is, how do you demonstrate ROI to my business? And how are you going to do that on an ongoing basis? And what is your roadmap? And ensuring that there's alignment with their, roadmap functionality and what your organization scaling will need. And so metrics and rewards is a huge one. And then the fifth one, seems kind of like a no-brainer, but plan it, do it. Having a good, Proper planning prevents poor performance. My dad told me that from the time I was this big.
Was he in the Corps? Was he a
He was
Marine?
not. He was not, but he was raised by my grandfather, who was a good old Navy man.
There you go.
And so yeah, proper planning prevents poor performance. So having a plan socially, to campaign around your, planned transformation, promoting it, getting testimonials, getting feedback, having a mechanism for feedback, having a mechanism to take all the good and the bad feedback and, let's evangelize the great stuff that's going right so people are excited about it, and let's try and fix the things that are going wrong. But having a plan on the front end, our implementation plans for marketing the change is 8 weeks long. We like 8 weeks lead time to campaign it. We do 4 weeks of campaigning and then 4 weeks of what we call pre-training to all of these subject matter experts and steering committees and all of those types of things. Because if you can get a small collective of individuals really excited about this change to go out and evangelize that, within that plan, you will have a markedly better outcome.
I think that entire process is incredibly thoughtful. I love it. And there's a technique that I'll overly summarize. And if people are interested in learning more about it, I can do a training video to break it down. But when it comes to alignment, and I use it with clients, and it's called you, me, us. And it goes to your point about roadmap and making sure that you don't end up on this, roadmap misalignment, but at a regular periodicals, generally annually. I like to do this, no longer than that. Sometimes you can do it, biannually, but I do this thing. It's super simple called you, me, us, where I'll literally take a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper blank, turn it landscape, draw 2 lines on it to create 3 panels. And just at the top of, the left one, I write you. At the top of the right panel, I write me. In the middle, I write us. And then I'm like, hey, why don't we talk about your roadmap? Why don't we talk about your key initiatives? And what are you trying to accomplish over the upcoming 12 to 18 months, right? And we just kind of peg off just kind of headers of the strategic initiatives so I can see what is in their purview. And then I reciprocate and I say, can I share with you what some of the things are that our key initiatives are, right? And I start listing those things out. And there's always going to be 2, 3, 4 alignment points. There's going to be 2 or 3, 4 that you can actually say, hey, these are both on the same list. How do we work together on this, right? How do we actually work together jointly and collaboratively to move these forward? And that makes it to the center us column. And it creates alignment, but it creates a collaborative partnership with vendors and clients. Yes. And if you're actually influencing those roadmaps, you actually have a greater influence to steer their roadmap towards your needs as a company. And you also, on the side of your clients, you can actually steer your service delivery to what they need and become more of an integrated partner. And when you said that you seek that alignment with your vendors and comparing the roadmap, it just reminded me that tool that I teach that I think is a good example of that kind of concept.
You're so spot on, because I was, because of that alignment, because of those road mapping conversations, I was able to be a part of over a dozen beta projects with other vendors, and that's when you can innovate. That's when, and I didn't have a big budget. I really didn't. I didn't have Ronstad's innovation fund. I didn't have any of that. I had pennies on the dollars to innovate with. And yet I was able to do over a dozen beta projects because I asked what was on their roadmap, and I would go, well, I want to be a part of that. You have automated Facebook jobs, or you have Alexa for jobs. I want Alexa for jobs.
Yeah,
and
right.
Well, it's not working yet. That's okay. Take my stuff and make it work. Practice with my stuff. Because then I get to go, first agency with Alexa for jobs, or, whatever that might be. So, if you are in alignment and in partnership, if you think of these, and not these technology investments not as a transactional type of thing, but long-term vendor partners that are going to be married to your successes and your outcomes, it will change your behavior as it relates to understanding where they're going versus where you're going.
I could not agree more with that. And when you look at where technology is changing as an industry, and you think about the opportunity that staffing agencies have, they can now, for the first time and forever, they can actually create the tech stack to give them the platform advantage. So when we hear about all these amazing, success stories in industry out there like Uber and Lyft and, Wonolo and, TaskRabbit and all these things, like, they're just platforms that connect a marketplace of, suppliers and consumers, right? That's really it. We have the ability to create that with our tech stacks to make life super easy for the marketplace that we're already facilitating fairly manually, historically speaking, and actually optimize that to let our people focus on the relationships they're in to give us that advantage. So I completely agree with where you're at with that one.
Nice. Yes. Your vendors are your friends.
They are, and they can be your competitive advantage if leveraged appropriately. So
yes,
I think that's amazing insight. I really do. And I value the time that you've invested in our viewers to share that with them. If there is somebody out there that is like, Lauren, how do I get that checklist of 5 things to think about so I can see it? Or Lauren, how do I set up a call with you to talk more about my specific situation because I'm unique and I face challenges that no one else in the staffing industry faces, right?
We laugh at those things, right?
Yeah, we do. We're all face the same problems. We do.
Right.
So how do they get a hold of you? What is the best way to get in touch with you to have that conversation or to get that? I'm sure I'll probably do a link to the cheat sheet, the 5 I guess 5-point step, the guideline of 5 ideas to be thoughtful in implementing it. But how do they connect with you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. And so you can always reach me on LinkedIn. And as a matter of fact, if your email doesn't go through, I will respond to you on LinkedIn. I think you experienced that because I do have Fort Knox around my, I do some government work. So I have Fort Knox going around my email hub, but I'm Lauren at leapconsultingsolutions.com. You can email me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I am the GOAT leader on LinkedIn. You can reach me there. You can reach, I have a chat on my website, www.leapconsultingsolutions.com. But LinkedIn is always a great place to find me. I'm exceedingly active on there. Yeah.
I can attest to that. Well, I'm grateful for you and your time today and just your knowledge and sharing with this audience and helping just pour into the staffing industry to help us move us forward technologically and becoming better positioned to navigate what is potentially a looming recession and hopefully make us stronger to come out the other side. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. It was a treat.